So, hello. So, good afternoon. This is Deborah Gray Young, and welcome to Rich Girls Club Power Network. I want to give a shout out to Renee Richardson, who is the founder and president of Rich Girls Club Power Network, and give her to say thank you for the opportunity to be of service to her audience today. Today, we are going to be talking about what do they mean when they say it is about decoding performance evaluations. And it is based on my latest book called What Do They Mean When They Say? And it's written particularly for professional women, although I've had some men contact me as well to say that it was very helpful to them as well. So a little bit about me. I am an executive coach as well as a consultant and an author, which you probably guessed since I've written a book, right? But I work mostly with professional women. My background is advertising and marketing. I've spent a good, well over 3 decades, that's all I'm going to admit to, 3 decades in the advertising and marketing field, where I specialized in connecting Fortune 500 brands to multicultural consumers. And so a lot of my consulting is around that, but also because I have worked with high performing teams, I have a lot of experience with managing teams and developing emerging leaders. And so I have layered my professional coach training on top of my extensive advertising and marketing and business background. So we're going to jump right into it. What do they mean when they say? So let me give you a little bit of background on this book, which I'm going to hold up for you, if you can see that. What do they mean when they say? And it's decoding performance evaluation speak. It's available on Amazon as well as on Kindle. And all of it's a short book. It's about probably not even 100 pages, but it's really based on a lot of the stories and questions that I received either from clients or mostly from clients, but people, particularly women, when they came out of performance evaluations or off the record kinds of discussions, they always had this question. You know, I had this performance evaluation, it went reasonably well, but what did they mean when they say? when they said this. And so there were a number of things that were just recurring themes. And one is, we'll talk about one today in depth, but there were just some recurring themes. And so the book explores 6 of those questions, and it really kind of gives you some interpretation of what was meant when they heard this phrase, number one. Number two, I strongly believe in removing anything that's within our control to move in terms of barriers. And so the book is constructed in a way that it will provide you with some insight, but also provide you with some tools and some suggestions on how to navigate the situation that you find yourself in. And you can do this with while you're working with your coach. And if you're not working with a coach, the tools and suggestions in this book should be helpful to you to help you navigate the situation that you are in. So again, the book is available on Amazon. There's also a Kindle edition for those of you who use electronic readers. I will say this though, if you like to write in your book, and there are some worksheets at the end, there's some exercises at the end of every chapter, you might want to get a physical copy of the book so that your notes and your answers to the questions are all in one place. Okay, so diving right in. So now that we've covered that, I want to start out by just giving you, as I said, some background, because all of the stories and the scenarios that are in the book are based on actual experiences that clients have had. Now, obviously, I don't use any names because confidentiality is very, very important to me. So I never use names. I never even use company names, and I seldom use industries. I seldom use industries. And so, but you will find yourself perhaps in some of these scenarios. And so the first one we're going to deal with this week, and I should also mention that this is a weekly series. We're going to do about 4 of these, this one being the first one. We're going to do about 4 or 5 of these, and it'll be on Tuesdays at noon Central. Okay, so what do they mean when they say, your work is excellent, but, and the first one we're going to dive in today is, you're not politically savvy. And you would be surprised at how often people have heard this, maybe not in these exact words, but that was the gist of it, that your work was good, your work is good, but you're not politically savvy. And so what does that mean? And so here are some of the symptoms of not being politically savvy. It's somebody who works hard, somebody who is obviously smart, someone who is liked by their peers for the most part. You know, there are a couple of folks that, you know, may not be as likable. They may even be an introvert, which presents a whole other host of challenges, which we won't go into here. And so they're basically people who keep their head down, right? They keep their head down, they keep their, they do excellent work. The problem with that is, or the challenge with that is, keeping your head down doesn't always get you ahead, right? So it doesn't always get you where it is that you want to go. And so that's the challenge with keeping your head down. And almost to the person that has come to me with help with strengthening their political savviness, to a person, they were someone who, you know, as I said, worked hard, was very smart, was very good at what they did, but kept their head down, and also had not the slightest interest in organizational politics. They've all said in some way or another, I don't like organizational politics. I don't have the stomach for it. I don't have the time for it. Unfortunately, organizational politics is necessary. And so I do a whole workshop on how to be politically savvy on your own terms. So we're going to cover a little bit of that today. And then at the end, I'm going to give you 6 steps that you can start to work on immediately, and then also some information on how to get a deeper dive. Okay, and so I wanted to share my screen with you today, but Facebook Live is not cooperating. So bear with me. If you see me moving around, it's because I'm trying to see my screen. Oh, the other part of this that's really, really important is people who experience, being told that they are not politically savvy are very often stuck in a position, the same position for a considerable amount of time. And I don't mean 1 or 2 years. I mean, being in a position 1 or 2 years is not being stuck. But when you find yourself being in the same position at the same level and the same level of responsibility for 5 years or more, you're stuck. And also, one of the other things that people who are not politically savvy experience is being overlooked. They're overlooked for promotions, overlooked for stretch assignments, and things like that. And so these are all scenarios that have come to me by people who were looking for some assistance with navigating it, strengthening their political savviness so that they could move ahead and move up the ladder in their organization. And so if any of these fit you, then you could very well be not as savvy politically as you think. So the next thing I want to talk about is how do we navigate this? How do we navigate this? And one of the things I also want to make sure that we make a distinction between organizational politics and foolishness. There is a difference. Sometimes it's a fine line, but there is a difference. And the difference being that foolishness, at least I define it as gossip, rumors, things that are unsubstantiated. That's not politics. That's just foolishness. And if that's the kind of thing that you don't have an appetite for, bravo, because those are the things that are not worth your energy, right? As a matter of fact, it could get you labeled the wrong way. So make the distinction between politics, organizational politics, and just plain old foolishness, because one is a necessity and one isn't. One is just a waste of time. Okay, and so moving on. So what does it mean to be politically savvy? So in order to be politically savvy, right, you really do need to know what that means. So being politically savvy means that you understand the critical business issues of the organization that you work for, and how your role fits into into that. So, whatever the critical business issues are, whatever the company's goals and objectives are, how does your role impact that, or how does it contribute to the company achieving its goals and objectives as it relates to what they have defined as the critical business issues, either for the fiscal year or for the long term, if it's a 5-year mission or a 10-year mission. That's part of what you really want to understand. The second thing you want to understand is, the second thing you really want to understand is Who are the key stakeholders that have some impact and over and influence over your not only your experience there at the organization, but your career trajectory, right? So who are the key stakeholders? And so let me give you, for instance, if you're an accountant and what you really want to be is the chief financial officer, the CFO, who is currently the CFO? Who was the CFO previously? And what was the path to the CFO's office? And the reason you want to understand that is because it's more than just personality, right? The CFO is a permanent position or a permanent role on the organizational chart. So people will come in and out of that role, but the role itself remains on the organizational chart. And so what is the relationship of that role to you, if that's what you aspire to where you are now, and who is responsible or has some influence over your trajectory as you move up the ladder to become that. That's important. And the reason I say that's important because for almost every person that I've coached around being politically savvy, one of the things that was lacking was knowing who the key stakeholders were that had some influence over their trajectory within the organization, or the person who was responsible for making the decisions, they didn't know who the person was, right? So if I was the accountant or senior accountant, and I was up for promotion to director or whatever, the person, the key stakeholder responsible for greenlighting that had no idea who I was. And I can't tell you how many times I've come across this. And this comes down to relationships, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how key that is, right? What are the key relationships that you have or should have? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And so it's not enough that you know, as I just said, it's not enough that you know who the key stakeholders are. They really do need to know who you are. And here's what's important about this, is that how you are perceived within your organization is very, very important. So I know a lot of us like to walk around saying, you know, I don't really care what other people think about me, and I don't really care what other people say. You should. Because as I tell seasoned professionals as well as emerging leaders, your brand, your reputation is the only currency you have. It is the only currency you have. And so how you are perceived in your organization, or how you are perceived, period, is very, very important. And a lot of what you will accomplish or not, and a lot of what you will experience or not, will be wholly dependent on how people perceive you. And so how that's important, but not only that, it's within your control. Now, you can't control what other people think about you, but what you can control is how you show up. You can control how you show up, and that's very, very important. And you should also know that how you are being perceived and your image and your brand has a lot more to do with how you look. It has a lot more to do with than how you look. And that's one of the things that I can't stress enough. I have come across a number of people who spent a great deal of time on their clothes and how they looked, and they weren't good collaborators. They weren't good. They didn't have solid leadership styles, and those are the kinds of things that I get into in depth with people that I'm coaching around being politically savvy. But understanding that how you are perceived within your organization has a lot more to do with than how you look. It has to do with your energy, and what you bring to to work every day, to your position. It has to do with how you interact with people. One of the questions I like to ask people, particularly those people who manage teams, is, do the people on your team work with you or work for you? And there is a huge difference in that answer. Depending on how you answer that, can make a world of difference. Okay, and that might be a question you might want to write down. Do the people on your team work with you, or do they work for you? And that's very important, and it's very telling. And it doesn't matter what you put on the paper. How you interact with those people on your team will tell the entire story. And what you want to be mindful of is when other people ask people on your team how it is to work with you, that will be the true telling. That will be the true telling. So just be mindful of that. And I do a lot of work with people around course correcting around that one particular dynamic. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with being told that you're not politically savvy, particularly if your MO has been to keep your head down and just work hard and hope that somebody notices it, and hope that a promotion or a stretch assignment comes out of you just keeping your head down? And one of the things I like to tell people is that you have to be politically savvy, even though you don't like politics. And there is a way to be politically savvy on your own terms. And one of the things, and this was the key to my success, was I kept my head down, but I kept my eyes up. So head down, eyes up. And what that simply means is you have to be aware of what's going on around you, right? I'm not talking about the gossip and the rumors, but what's going on in terms of where the company is headed. What are some of the major issues that the company is facing? How do your skills and your particular role impact that? And for no other for a bunch of reasons, but for the main one, you don't ever want to get blindsided. People who are not politically savvy get blindsided because they don't see and they can't anticipate what's coming around the corner. And that can't tell you how important that is, to be able to have that kind of foresight. And that foresight comes from being politically savvy. So head down, eyes up, paying attention to the business dynamics, paying attention to the decisions that are being made, understanding what's driving those decisions, and understanding, most of all, the key stakeholders that have some influence over your experience within the organization and the trajectory. And so next we're going to talk about how you can do that. And again, I'm giving you sort of the top line of a more in-depth workshop that I do, but here are 6 steps to becoming politically savvy that I'm going to give you. You don't have to write them all down. If you inbox Renee, she can get these to you. And if you, or you can inbox me, I'll give you my email address, and I'll be happy to send them to you. It's not just 6 steps, it's 6 steps with some detailed instruction, actually, that you can begin to put to use immediately. And so the first thing to becoming politically savvy is really being clear about your goals within the organization. What is it that you want to achieve within the organization? The second thing is who are the key stakeholders that have some influence over not just your experience there at the company, but have some influence over your trajectory in the company. Or they might be someone that you want to model. And so who are those people? And if you don't currently have a relationship with them, you need to. And so we'll talk about the next step is, how do you do that? How do you begin to develop key relationships? One of the things I recommend to my clients is that you identify who these people are, and then you develop what I call a mini dossier, right? Develop a dossier. Now, one of the things you don't know about me is I'm a real spy buff. I love spy pictures. So, James Bond, Jason Bourne, all of them. I love spy stuff. And so dossiers to me are really important. It helps give you some background and some insight into the person or to the people. And in my book, there's a stakeholder map. And this is really key. You can reproduce it. It's very simple. It's nothing complex about it, other than the thought that you put into it. But it's basically a table that you fill in. And you create a dossier and you create a stakeholder map. And what those two things do for you is to help you, understand who the stakeholders are, and then also where's some common ground that you might begin to establish a relationship. Now, we're not talking about, inviting people out to dinner. We're talking about some really simple things as a first step, understanding what their interests are, understanding their role within the organization, what drives them, what is keeping them up at night, those kinds of things. And there's some simple steps that you can do right from where you are at this minute to help you start to assemble a dossier on that. And another thing that's also very, very important when it comes to being politically savvy and establishing these relationships is understanding your communication style. So what is your dominant communication style? And that doesn't seem like that's very important, but I can't tell you how much time I spend with clients around this as well. Understanding not only your communication style, but the communication style of those people that you interact with the most, particularly people on your team and peers that you interact with. This is very, very important, and it ties directly to how you are perceived within your organization. Okay, and in addition to that, the other thing that's critical is understanding your management style and your leadership style. They could be one and the same, but not necessarily. And so understanding your management style and your leadership style. And if you don't have a handle on those things, you can work with your coach. You can have a 360 assessment done that will really help you understand how people view you and how people interpret your behaviors. And those are things that you want to really, really be on top of, because your behaviors and how you show up, as I said in the very beginning, are things that are within your direct control. So you might not be able to control how people think about you, but you are in total control of how you show up. And that is your responsibility, to control how you show up. The fifth step in this, how to become politically savvy, is doing something I call a selfie. This is not taking out your camera and taking a cute picture of you at the restaurant with your friends. That's not this at all. Taking a selfie, and this is something you can do right now if you wanted to. It's a really quick exercise. I give people 15 seconds to do this, right? So in 15 seconds or less, what are you the go-to person for? So within your organization, what are you the go-to person for? And just write it down real quick, 15 seconds. What are you the go-to person for? And that is, that's really key. The second part of this exercise is, in 15 seconds or less, what are the critical issues facing either your organization or your industry? In 15 seconds, give me the top 3 critical issues facing the industry or your organization. And if you look at those 2 things, what are you the go-to person for, and what are the critical issues, then how closely aligned are they? Now, if you're the go-to person for where all the great restaurants are, you have a little bit of work to do. Maybe more than a little bit of work to do. And there is a third part to this, and that is, if you're not the go-to person, if you're not happy with what you're the go-to person for, how do you change that? What is it that you would like to be the go-to person for, right? And so whatever that is, how do you begin to accomplish that? And then lastly, and this ties to the selfie that we just did, really understanding the business situation of the company and the goals and objectives of the company, and how your role fits into that. How does your role contribute towards the company being able to accomplish its business mission? And that could be over the next 12 months, the next 5 years. Most often companies don't have just a year plan. It's a long-term plan. And so understand the long-term plan and how you fit into that. If you haven't taken a look at if it's a public corporation, taking a look at the annual report. And there's some other things as well that we won't go into here, but there are a number of other things. Some of those things that you will think, a lot of people think, are kind of corny, but they are very important. And so that's all I've got. Thank you for your time, and inbox me or inbox Renee for any questions that you might have. My email address is coachdgrayyoung@gmail.com. That's coachdgrayyoung@gmail.com. And that's how you can reach me, or you can inbox Renee and she knows how to find me. And thank you so much for your time. And next week, we'll be here again at the same time with another topic on what do they mean when they say.